Welcome to Sex Help for Smart People. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Jurgens, former science professor turned somatic sexologist and intimacy coach. This podcast is all about helping smart women over 40 and their partners of all genders get the evidence-based relationship and intimacy support you need for great sex and connections. I'm glad you're here, so let's get at it. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 26. Today is all about sexological bodywork. We're going to talk about what it is and when you might think about getting a sexological bodyworker. And we're going to do that with an awesome interview with my colleague and friend, Rahi Chun, who is a sexological bodyworker himself and also host of the Organic Sexuality podcast. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. All right. Hey, everyone. I am so happy to be here today with my colleague and friend, Rahi Chun. We are going to talk all about sexological bodywork. And I want to introduce Rahi first. He is a sex educator and a sexological bodyworker, which we will explain more about what that is. And he will explain what that is today. And Rahi also teaches things like genital de-armoring for individuals and couples, and has a very diverse training background in somatic bodywork and psychology. So huge welcome, Rahi. I'm so glad you're here. And is there anything else you want to just say about who you are off the bat before we get started?
Oh, wow. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Laura. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to have you on my podcast. So it's great to be on your podcast as well. Yeah, I think you said it all. I'm a somatic sex educator, body worker. Just that my particular body of work focuses on repairing rupture sequentially from the developmental years into teenage years into adult years. So I think that makes it a little unique. And we'll get into the whole sexological body worker definition and landscape. But
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And Rahi's podcast, which we'll also mention at the end, is also called Organic Sexuality, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Which is wonderful. And I highly recommend it. So I know you're a podcast listener, so you're going to want to go check that one out. So how about we start out with just talking about what the heck is sexological bodywork and what is what we might call, for shorthand, a sex bod. What does a sexological bodyworker do?
Sure. So the field of sexological bodywork was approved first by the state of California in 2003. So it's been around for a little over 2 decades. And at the time, it was housed at the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality, which had its kind of advanced educational credentials. Since then, there have now been 7 sexological bodyworker trainings all around the world, including the UK, Portugal, Australia, Germany. And the foundational curriculum is similar at all these institutes. And that is to empower and educate clients to have a felt sense understanding of their arousal and pleasure patterns, their erogenous anatomy, and have the ability and practice giving voice to their body's choices. So that's kind of like a really simple synopsis of what sex bods, short for sexological body workers, are trained to facilitate and empower their clients with. Now, on top of that, every sex bod tends to interweave that foundational curriculum with other things of their interest. Like, for example, I have a background in psychology, particularly keen on understanding how the initial touch and sexual imprints of children affect adult sexual habits, behaviors, and patterns. There are colleagues of mine who, interweave sex bod with like kink culture, dom subculture, let's see, postpartum issues. There are doulas who become sex bods and kind of interweave those kind of areas of expertise. So if you go to 10 different sexological body workers, they will tend to be different kinds of sessions, but the basic foundation is really facilitating a felt sensomatic experience so that the client understands their erotic and arousal pleasure capacity so that they can give voice to their body's choices of what it is their body wants to receive and experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a really helpful explanation. And I think it's really important just to clarify for everyone that we are talking about genital touch. So in sexological bodywork, there is genital touch typically involved. And I don't know, is there anything else you want to say about that, Rahi, as it relates to, I mean, there are some legalities and some legal restrictions in certain states, even though this is a really profound and important healing modality. I think it is just a real shame that in the US in particular, our legal structure and a lot of the culture, sex shaming culture has not distinguished between sexological body workers and sex workers. And we also can talk about, or we could think about how sex work is also so demonized, but even just this in service of people's healing, because there is some genital touch.
Yeah, the genital touch is determined by what the client wants to explore and educate themselves around. So everything is client-led. So that should be underscored. So when a client comes, whatever their body experiences, in an ideal situation, and I say ideal because, they're all such a wide range of practitioners that are trauma informed to different degrees. It should be led and guided by the sense of safety and readiness of the client's body. So a lot of clients are not ready for genital touch. So there will a genital touch. Other clients come specifically because they want to. They've never had. They've never explored their erogenous anatomy in their pelvis. Whether that's prostate-induced pleasure or cervical pleasure. So they're wanting that genital contact. So it's really client-based. I have colleagues where most of it is body-based, but they're also fully clothed. So it depends on the practitioner and the client's sense of safety. As far as legality, this correlates with genital touch because in a lot of states, if there is genital contact by a non-medical licensed professional and an exchange of money, considered prostitution. And so for that reason, sexological bodywork is in a gray zone in most of the states. Like in California, because it was approved by the state government in 2003, we're fine here. But in a state like Nevada, where prostitution is legal, it's not an issue. And to that point, countries like Germany, where prostitution is legal, it's legal as well. But in a lot of states in the U.S., it's kind of there's been no precedent set in the courts as to whether this is, even though it's therapeutic, it's based on the client's consent. There hasn't been a court case to establish the legality in a lot of states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for that reason, it can sometimes be hard to find a sexological body worker locally. And some people do travel. When I worked with you, I traveled to you, and people do travel from all kinds of places to see sexological body workers. So that is just something to be aware of. But thank you so much for that great explanation. Really appreciate that. I think that's really helpful for everybody to kind of just get your head around what we're talking about here, right? So what about, how do you see the benefits of, and particularly the kind of sexological body work you do, or if you want to mention other colleagues of yours too, what specific issues or challenges or curiosities might people be coming to you with, where sexological body work is really a great tool to help them? Sure.
Well, the issues and the experiences that clients come with are quite broad. They range, like if I just look at my 10 years of serving sessions, on one end, they can range from I've had clients who've been circumcised clitorally when they were children, or prostituted children, and so have essentially frozen pelvises with no sensation. All the way to the other to tantra teachers locally who want to experience the kind of extended orgasms that they're teaching about. So it's a very, very wide spectrum. Just the last few calls yesterday I was on a discovery call with a person who is 38 years old and she's never had an orgasm. And so, in the call, I mean, because I've seen, because there tend to be patterns, so for example, with her, I shared with her, oftentimes with anorgasmic clients, I find that either very much in control, cannot surrender to the known of what an orgasm will invite. There could be religious, cultural conditioning, or some type of conservative sexual conditioning. I'm going to go to hell with pleasure, these kinds of things, or a lot of guilt associated with their pleasure. So just within half an hour, her parents were immigrants from Asia and, had emotional support. So she very much has a tight grip on her life control. She's terminated every relationship she's ever been in. On top of that, she's a bodybuilder. And so she's very much about demanding her body perform for her, And so, that's just an example of like, an issue that is very common in orgasmia, or difficulty in letting go to pleasure, that can be assessed quite quickly by people who've been in the field and have seen kind of certain patterns or certain commonalities associated with different issues. But they range from essentially anyone who feels that they are not expressing and experiencing their sexual potential to the degree that they desire, chances are there's some way. And that could be either biomechanical, tension in the pelvis or a pinched nerve. It could be biochemical, not enough blood flow, or blood that's been coagulated for a variety of reasons, hormonal or otherwise, that's not enlivening their tissue sensitivity. It could be trauma-based, or it could be something like scar tissue. So, we're taught to properly assess what the issue is and resolve that issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that so much. And I see people with a lot of the similar issues and work with them on sort of different levels, a lot of times on sort of emotional levels, releasing the shame, finding confidence, really kind of unwinding some of that stuff so they can start learning how to find pleasure with themselves, if that's the most kind of comfortable route first, and or their partners. But for somebody who really wants to discover what's possible with their bodies, and really also all of these sort of physiological things that could be going on, especially if there's a lot of numbness or pain or something like that, it makes so much sense sometimes to do those things in conjunction, like do the emotional work and see a sexological body worker to really help you unwind some of all these issues that you're talking about. And thank you so much. That's really great. So do you, what do you think about that? What do you think about like the emotional work and kind of whether you suggest people do it before or after, or like the de-shaming work, or working with somebody like a coach like me or a therapist where, and a therapist is going to be more talk-based, and then I'm going to do more somatic and kind of practice-based stuff, as you know. But what do you think about how that kind of fits in with sexological body work? What would you suggest people, how would they make a decision about when would be a good time to see a sex bod?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's going to really require an attunement within the client, because, I think, for example, like working with a sex coach like yourself in conjunction could be really helpful, because sexological body workers we're not, our realm is with the body and the felt sense response of the body. We're not trained. We facilitate anything regarding relational dynamics, deepening relational intimacy, communication with your partner, all of the things that somatica coaches and sex and intimacy coaches are so great at. So to do that in conjunction could be really amazing because, with a sex you are resolving, the physiological or psychosomatic obstacles to your pleasure. And then you can engage with a sex and intimacy coach to deepen your capacity to communicate those needs or those desires and have that really be received and understand how that affects a relational dynamic. But, it's going to really depend on what the specific issue is. Like to give an extreme example, like, my client who was circumcised clitorally as a child, like she would need to resolve her issues to a certain degree, the numbness issues to a certain degree to even know what her desires are. Whereas someone else, may just never have gotten the proper sex ed, because it's just non-existent in our culture. So, for them, I think it'd be great to work in conjunction with a sex and intimacy coach, because then it's kind of like they're running up and down the stairs as well as getting their speed on the track field. They're doing it in sync, and they can really feed each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So good.
Yeah.
Such a good point that it really depends on the issue. It can really be helpful to talk to somebody and see, and also, like when you're on a journey like that, when you're on some sort of healing around your sexuality and you're working on it, usually, you kind of bump into the things you need at some point along the way in whatever order they kind of need to happen. So I love that there's, yes, they can feed into each other and support. And then sometimes they're just like really, like you say, with somebody who has experienced like genital mutilation as a child, having a sexological body worker really just guide and see what is possible and kind of help them open up their connection to their pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
So important. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, such important work too. And
Yeah.
it's such a profound need, right? Especially for people who've been exploited as children or prostituted as children, or have had all kinds of traumatic abuse and sex abuse as kids and aren't experiencing the genital sensation that they might hope for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious with you, Laura, have you found yourself in that kind of tag team dynamic with any of your clients who are working with other body-based practitioners, and the kind of exponential fit that comes from working on kind of your emotional, relational capacity as well as your sensorial, felt sense, somatic capacity?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think I will be having probably more as we keep increasing awareness of the different types of professionals that are available. But I find that I tend to be kind of an entryway. So a lot of people might not know about a sexological body work. And I tend to refer out to people like you. I've sent people your direction and to other sexological body workers that are good colleagues that I know are very reputable and do great work. So that tends, and then I also refer out to like a trauma therapist for certain types of trauma if they have not really dealt with the emotional or like the physical residue of the trauma. So I might refer to, depending on the types of trauma and the type of person, refer to somebody who does internal family systems or EMDR or one of these sort of like very useful, specific, time-limited trauma modalities. But people typically come to me sort of like they're really entry level. I get a lot of people who haven't ever talked to anybody ever about their sex life or their challenges around sex. And so I tend to be kind of a safe landing place for people who feel like they have a lot of shame or they haven't ever opened up about these things. And we work together to get them to a point where they could even seek the type of other help that another somatic professional might be able to offer.
That is such a an important like landing place that you provide, because like that, I mean, we all know how much courage it can take for someone to get to a point of even reaching out for assistance or support, and you being there and holding that safe, unregarding, like unconditional positive regard makes it safe for them to continue exploring. So that's a real like important container that you hold.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel the same. I feel like your work, it was really profound for me, and I've talked about it on your podcast, but I feel like that the conjunction and sort of putting all those puzzle pieces together for people and really having the expertise and somebody who can bring an experienced and very grounded approach to exploring what's possible in our erogenous zones is just and giving the body the pacing it needs and the space for the voice of the body is something really profound. And one of the things that you and I share, which I think is just so important in your practice and was really important for me, and I know we've talked about this, how important it is for your clients too, is the neuroaffective touch training that you've done and just really having that trauma-informed somatic touch, aware and attuned touch with people, not even genital touch, but just to help the body relax and sort of discover what feels good. And I wonder, how important do you feel like that is in your practice?
Well, I think it is profound. I start every session with neuroaffective touch, which was developed by senior somatic experience trainers. And the reason I start with it is, it starts it's the client to start to attune to their own body sensations and listen for what their body really needs. And I think for a lot of us, that process was hijacked by parents who thought they knew what our body wanted, better than us. And so it's really a wonderful kind of foundational new way to relate with the body that I really love, because it sets up the client to know what to ask for and know how to voice for what their body wants when we get to the sexological body work.
Yeah.
And it's deeply down-regulating, and it can really bring up a lot of ways in which we lacked that as children, or we missed it. We had a yearning to be supported in a certain way as children, and it gets touched into during the neuroaffective touch process, which can be really restorative and empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm loving that a modality and approach for working with people relationally, because the same thing is true about applying it to voicing our needs in partnership, voicing our needs during a sexual encounter with a partner, and even just being able to tap into what our body actually wants and give it room to speak is so wonderful. So I've been working with couples with that too, and helping couples teach it, experience it together. And I'm just so glad that you do that, because I think it's so profound and important.
Yeah, it should be like a given that all of us know how to attune to our own bodies and give voice to what we want. I find that especially couples who are younger, they're so into impressing the other person with their sexual skills or their competency, or wanting to be good enough, that they really do override any kind of semblance of what their body wants or desires. And so it's a really good invitation to tune in and be with what it is their body wants.
Yeah, absolutely. And then those patterns get sort of baked into our long-term relationships and carried forward. And all of a sudden we wind up, 40, 50, 60 years old saying, wow, we've been having sex the same way. And I've been actually doing it as a performance for the last 30 years. And I don't actually
Wow.
know what I really like. And so we see, and then all of a sudden we have like low libido and we're wondering why. And it's like, well, we haven't actually given our body anything that she wanted for a really long time because we haven't bothered to ask. So, or
Yeah.
we haven't taken the time to discover it because we somehow felt like we weren't entitled to that or something. So it's,
Right.
yeah, you're right. It would be so great if we all felt like it was easy to hear that voice in our body and to speak it, but sometimes we need help practicing.
Absolutely. I think the point you're making is really important, and when that is the connection between one's libido, a healthy libido, and the body really being satiated in its desire. Like if there is a body that's not being satiated in its desires, and even more than that, hasn't a clue what its desires are, then of course it's going to low libido, or where sex is not a priority or pleasure is not a priority. Um, I should also want to say that so much of the indoctrination in our culture is really skewed towards male pleasure. I mean, certainly the porn culture, even media in general. And so, our arousal patterns are so different that a movie cannot accurately like let foreplay unfold in real time, because it would be a 45-minute like scene as opposed to like a three
Hmm.
minutes. And so we're really educating young people a tremendous disservice because we are miseducating them, from childhood on with these examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for making that point. I really appreciate it. So,
Yeah.
is there anything that you feel like is really important for people, for listeners to know about how to choose a sexological body worker if you feel like you need one, how to be
Mhm.
discerning about how you choose one? Um, is there anything you want to say about that before we kind of wrap
Yeah.
up and let people know how
Yeah.
to find you?
Well, there is a directory at the Sexological Body Worker website, which I
Hmm.
believe is just sexologicalbodyworkers.org. Um, what I recommend to everyone is most sexological body workers will invite a discovery call. So you'll, be on the phone with someone, and it's really important to gauge your body's sense of safety with that person, because it's very, very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable experience to disclose, and certainly to engage in any kind of touch that includes your pelvis. I mean, your body in general, but especially your pelvis and genitalia, especially if there's been a history of trauma. So gauging how the body responds to their voice, to their tone, to the conversation. Are they really sincerely interested in your circumstances? Do you feel like they get you? And do you feel like they understand like what it is you're going through? So you're the same of your body and kind of their history, and their understanding of how to resolve whatever intention or issue it is that you're presenting. I would say those are the most important things.
Wonderful. That's so perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So, as we kind of start wrapping up, I want to make sure everybody knows how to find you. And I will link everything for y'all in the show notes. So, we'll put up the link for the Sexological Body Workers website. We'll put up Rahi's links. But what are the what are the offerings you have going on, and how do people find them?
Sure, thanks. My website is somaticsexualwholeness.com, somaticsexualwholeness.com. You can, on that website, it's kind of like a home, for a hub for everything I offer, which includes the podcast, which is free. Um, I offer an online course called Keys to Genital De-armoring. You can experience it self-study, or there are cohorts that I guide through 9 Zoom calls, once or twice a year. There are also retreats. So we had a couples retreat last year. There will likely be one either this winter or next year. Um, uh, and that's all on the website.
Awesome. Thanks, Rahi. Thanks so much for being here. I think this is really helpful for people, and I just really want to offer gratitude for your generosity in sharing your thoughts and expertise.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me on, Laura. It's great to see you.
Hey, if you're curious about how you could have better sex and connections, go grab my free guide, Find Your Secret Turn-Ons. It's right on my website, www.laurajurgens.com, and the link is in the show notes. I'll see you here next time.